Hey there, it's Coach Curl here, and welcome to Leadership Lessons, your hump day boost to help you finish your week strongly. Now, one of the things I often hear from people are statements like, I just seem to have lost my mojo. I just can't get started today. I've lost my motivation. How many times have we heard people say that? Especially, I guess, since COVID came in to the world. On the other side of the ledger, we often hear things from people saying, I've been on fire today. I'm jumping out of my skin. I'm so excited. I'm passionate. I'm so encouraged to do something. Energy and enthusiasm. It seems to ebb and it seems to flow. We either have too much or we have too little. And it's quite an interesting concept to start to explore, because often it seems like we can never get the perfect balance. And then we see the world of social media, and where we're often sharing posts about how pumped we are, how excited we are, how awesome it was to be somewhere, how awesome it was to do, see, or feel something, whatever that is. Whatever you were posting about, even though we're probably actually feeling a bit like shit, right? So it's such a compelling world, this concept of energy and enthusiasm, such a compelling place. And often when we know those overly optimistic or overly enthusiastic people that we know in our lives, that's often a turn-off. Some come across as fake. Some, for some, it comes across that someone's trying to be better than them, more enthusiastic, more positive. It's a bit of a double-edged sword. We either have it and we're full of it, and then people think we're fake, or we don't have enough and we don't get anywhere. Enthusiasm, have too much and turn the world off, or have too little and make nothing happen. It's quite a challenging conundrum. Michael Heppel, in his best-selling book, The Edge, talks about people having their own enthusometer. Enthusometer. I know it sounds a bit corny, but enthusometer. And it's really interesting when you think about it from an average day perspective and the level of enthusiasm that we may have for certain things in our world. So think about your levels of enthusiasm. So when the alarm clock goes off, how would you rate on maybe a scale of 1 to 10 your level of enthusiasm for that particular moment of the day? What's that look like? What about your commute to work? What does that look like from an enthusiasm on your enthusometer? How enthusiastic are you on your commute to work? What about the first job of the day? Where does that rate? What about putting the garbage out? Where does that rate? What about your boss when he passes on that problem? Yep. Where does that rate on your enthusometer? What about that presentation you've got to do to the board, the one that's going to either make or break you? How enthusiastic are you for that? What about lunch? How's your enthusometer happening when you go on lunch? What about if you're going to have a drink with lunch? How enthusiastic are you then? What about getting home? Where does that rate? What about cooking a meal? Where does that rate? Watching your favorite show, following your favorite team, where does that rate on your enthusometer? And finally, going to bed, how does that rate? It's pretty obvious that we're not going to score the same level of enthusiasm for all that list of tasks. Pretty obvious. But it's also pretty obvious that some of those tasks are more important than others. You with me? You're sort of getting the drift of where I'm going with this? It's pretty obvious that out of that list of tasks, they all don't rate the same. You don't have the same level of enthusiasm when the alarm goes off, to doing an important presentation, to putting the garbage out, to having a drink with your lunch, right? It is just not on. Your enthusiasm levels are going to be different. But it's important to also understand that some of those are more important than others. Doing that presentation that's going to make or break your career, I'd say that's pretty important. You would want your energy levels to be up or higher than normal. And what we see is that if you don't have enthusiasm, you have to follow a process to create it. And it's interesting that even when we talk about high performance people, they also have their relevant ups and downs. The major difference is that they're just starting on a higher base than the rest of us mere mortals, I guess. They're just starting at a higher base because they're more optimistic, they're more naturally enthusiastic. So how do you create enthusiasm when it's waning? And this is where the lesson comes in today. Because what successful people do is they'll take themselves back to a time when they were having success, where things were in flow, where they were feeling energetic. And they'll go out of their way to recreate that mindset around that moment in time, that period of time, that achievement, that outcome. They will go out of their way to recreate that mindset. They'll think about what they were thinking about at the time. They were thinking about what was their level of excitement. What was the outcome? What was the opportunity? What was the potential that was getting them excited in relation to that? So they go out of their way to recreate that moment in time when they were feeling in flow, they were feeling successful. But they'll also look to find something to be enthusiastic about. So even though they may be doing a mundane task, something that they don't maybe necessarily enjoy, they'll get enthusiastic. They'll look for that enthusiasm. They'll look for something to be enthusiastic about. And potentially that could even relate to what it is that they're going to do when they finish that task. Okay? So they try to recreate the mindset and then they look for something that's going to help them be enthusiastic. Remember, enthusiasm, too much is a turn off for others and too little just ruins our progression in life. Too much, too little. We've got to find that balance. But because success won't happen without it. Success will not happen without energy. It will not happen without enthusiasm. So visualize it, recreate it, and let's go out and find it. Thanks for listening. I'll see you all next week on Leadership Lessons.